What's happening, sports fans? Welcome back to another week of the San Diego High School Boys and Girls Lacrosse Podcast. I am Christian Pedersen. This is the man that you're all actually here to see, Coach Tom DeMeo. Coach, spring break has happened. Summer is here, and yet you are still wearing a hat and a hoodie. Is that just the Northeast froze you deep and you've never really thawed out from that?
Yeah, I think that could be it. I also I enjoy to keep the sun off me. I'm not a big sunburn guy, so
that's where I was going.
So
I was expecting maybe I like to have I like to sweat with my players at practice.
There you go.
Type of line. Any one of those good coach cliches. Exactly. Any coach cliche you want to shoot out during this podcast. So, little less than a month away from the playoffs, couple of weeks. Lacrosse, no one's playing those even amount of games, so everyone still has I have 6 games left, I have 8 games left, some have 10, some have 5, everything in the middle. But right now, what we're going to do is do our best to take a look at the playoffs, the rankings, the whatever you want to say. CIF has made a decision in the last 2 weeks to move to lax numbers as being the official ranking system that they're going to use for the playoffs. Happy with this decision? Don't know. Jury's still out on this decision.
It doesn't, for my program personally, it drops us down a bit, but I think it lines up well with what we've done the past couple of years with lax power, and there's a formula they use, and I think it's definitely more accurate than the max prep. So, I think everyone's happy with it, and we're just sorting it out now because like I said, it was just a couple of weeks ago. So some of the things we might have done earlier in the season, we might have done different. Margin of victory does matter more. So I think that plays into it. But ultimately, it looks pretty good.
So overall, maybe generally a positive thing to have a lacrosse-specific entity governing the playoffs for a lacrosse season as opposed to just the generalized max prep, one-size-fits-all template.
Yeah, exactly. And the other template was more based on just wins. So like I said, now there's a formula that if you play a good team and a good schedule and you play them close and you lose the game, you get credit for that. So I think that's a positive step for a lot of our teams in San Diego.
So what we're going to do now is we're on lax numbers, and we're going to sort of talk about the rankings and the numbers, but I want everyone to keep in mind that this is so new that lax numbers does not have it finessed out, D1, D2. They just have everybody in San Diego ranked. So we're going to try and maybe look at top 10 as one group, next 10 as a group, and sort of somewhere in there, I think you'll naturally sort of see where the D1 and D2 teams are. But there are some teams in here that will say, oh, so-and-so right now is the 15th or 12th or whatever it is number overall team. And just know that we know that we're talking about a D2 team or we're talking about a D1 team, but it just, for the sake of this being so new, they don't have it conveniently put in a laptop-sized format that I can just shoot at you. So, guys or girls, which one do you want to start with?
Start with the guys.
All right. So, no surprise, I suppose, is that even with a switched-up ranking system, Torrey Pines still finds themselves number one, the defending champions. As
they should be. I mean, they haven't lost anyone in San Diego, so that's they are the number one team, and until someone proves it otherwise.
Right behind them, La Costa Canyon, La Jolla High School, Coronado rounds out the top 4. Now, that Coronado one, kind of surprising a little bit. A lot of graduation hitting them really hard. Last year, they made it to a championship game, played Torrey Pines really strong. You didn't know, though, what you were going to get with a new offense, with a new goalie, all that from Coronado, and finding themselves. They're 9-4 right now. They're tied with Cathedral Catholic in 4th place. That's not a bad result, though, for Coronado.
No, it's not, and they do return their goalie in Joe Walsh. And he was a standout last year.
That's true. It's been 2 years, hasn't it? Since
Easton. And so they had a big graduation. They had 23 seniors last year. I think what's helping them in the new format is they play a pretty tough out of state schedule. So they benefit from that. Even with the 4 losses, it puts them above some of the middle of the pack teams. But you can see San Marcos is rated below them, and I think San Marcos beat Coronado fairly substantially. So this, to your point, there's still some things that have to shake out here. But ultimately, I think we've said this all year. After I said the big 2, and now I put La Jolla in there as the 3rd team.
Let's talk about La Jolla then, because 3 championships in a row for La Jolla, winning Division II and then Division I. Is this a natural progression, or is this something where this is now all of their talent has accrued to being juniors and seniors and they need to get it done this year? Or do you expect that, man, La Jolla, much like yourselves, LCC, Torrey, Coronado, will just kind of perennially start to be in that mix?
Yeah, I think La Jolla, they've had a strong youth program over the past few years, and I've talked about that in the past on the show, and I think they're in that category. They actually have a lot of good young talent. It's not all seniors. Yep. This isn't like a one-shot and done. Like San Marcos, I think they're moving into that top 5 tier type team. And
so you mentioned San Marcos again. They're at 6th right now. You guys are right on their heels at 7th. Yep. Although San Marcos comes in 7-6, you guys are 10-1. So it does show that the difficulty sometimes of getting those correct games to nuance out the schedule. You're like, what? San Marcos beats Coronado. We're 4 games better than them in the actual just wins losses. Still does seem like they're all together. But then a team right behind you guys in St. Augustine or Saints or St. Augustine or however you want to pronounce it. That's another one like La Jolla that to me is a sign of the times changing to expand the field a little bit more. That there's some new teams that aren't just one and done. They're moving into this conversation of, look, lacrosse is not a 4-team sport anymore. It's 6, it's 8, it's maybe even 10 teams that, when you lace them up, could beat anybody on a given day.
Yeah, and I think last week was a great example of that. And shout out to Saints for beating Cathedral last week.
The Holy Bowl, man.
So that's to me, that's the kind of win that starts things, starts off your program. It's a statement game for the program. Signature game. You can use both of them. But signature's a good one. But yeah, I mean, that's congratulations to those guys. And it's one game, but it does start to your point, you start to see a changing of the guard and some things leveling out. And
because Saints is currently 1 spot ahead of Poway. Correct. And now, if you had heard that sentence roll out of my mouth a couple years ago when we first started doing this podcast, I'm pretty sure you've been like, Christian, you don't know anything about lacrosse. Why do you have this job? But now we're in this world where Coach Burt is gone, Coach Cooper is gone. Like the last couple generations of coaches are gone. There's a new faces to the game, and now teams like Poway have to really compete and fight for that spot. Do you think Poway can make it up into that open division?
I do think so. I haven't looked at their schedule go forward, but they were saddled with some tough losses. I think they belong in the top 8, and I think the rankings still need to play themselves out a little bit. But I think they're gonna sneak into that top 8. I think they deserve to be there.
As we get down to 10, the team that has kind of been really surprising ever since a big win earlier this year against Westview, and that is Grossmont. They are now 15-0, so sustained success, and this is the potential of 2, 3, 4 years ago La Jolla, 2, 3, 4 years ago Saints. Yep. They look like they are poised to be the new team down in the lower division, making a bunch of noise, being like, hey, you got to put some respect on us. And it's nice to see that coming from an East County team. Yep. That geographically the game is physically following the freeway. It's moving out. Yeah,
I mean, I think one of the things you're seeing is that the teams that sort of home growing their players are starting to have success, and that's great to see. I mean, that's what we try to do that here, and it's a little tougher at a private school, but it is. You're seeing that's something that Grossmont did. They got, I think it's the East County Rebels or something out there, and we've seen them on the youth circuit, and those guys are having some success. I mean, I do think. That the undefeated record, I think by Max Preps, they were one of the teams that probably dropped the most because it gave the credit to wins. But are they there competing with Torrey Pines? No.
I mean,
they're not there yet. But I think you're right. They are one of those teams that I know if we were in the lower the Division I bracket, they would be a team to contend with. That they would be probably a favored team in that bracket.
Well, they're just a team that you look at and you maybe wonder, okay, flash in the pan, they just got the right teams, they got the right schedule, but then you also look at the way that, like I said, with some of these other teams, you can project out that just there's starting to be enough youth players. There's starting to be enough homegrown talent that it's not, we got to hold on to this one senior or that one attack or that one goalie and just ride them for all the wins we can. It's now, look, we just got legitimate talent. We're kind of getting loaded. We're kind of getting stacked. Looking down, 11 through 15 is Westview, Valley Center, Carlsbad, La Jolla Country Day, Rancho Bernardo. Anybody out of there that you feel like...
my reaction to all, I mean, I know if I when I play those teams, or if I play those teams, they're all good teams. They're all capable of, when you look at the scores, they've all had, either a signature win or a close 1-goal game with a really good team. So those are all teams that can win on any given day. And so, that's those perfect examples are like teams that have been around, and they can contend with anyone on their day. And just like with anything with high school kids, sometimes it goes one way or the other.
Well, and right now we're starting to get into that transition between D1 and D2. So when I say that some of these teams are, when I say that Patrick Henry is 19th, I don't mean that they are really truly the 19th best team. I mean, they are according to these rankings, but they're not going to come in as the 19 seed in their playoff bracket. Just to round out the top 20 for the guys, Granite Hills at 16, they are 10-4. They're another program that, they're lacking that signature big win. They don't play Torrey, they don't play LCC, but I'm sure that you can testify eventually those teams will give you a shot.
Yeah.
You'll lose those games, but you'll at least be on that rotation of getting to play that bigger team. And that's kind of where Granite Hills is sitting at. 17 Bishops. Only 1 in 10.
Yeah,
that's a combination of graduation, small school problems, and then injuries to Tyler Buckner. Single-handedly kind of derailing.
A couple injuries to two of their better players this year that have derailed.
Chase Ladrino kind of beat up all season long.
And so and that's one of the things we look at, and you see this happen in college across as well. Is we expect Bishops to be a top 10 team like us, and so you have those two games in your league on the schedule, and if they're 1 in 10. You lose some strength of schedule, and it impacts everyone that plays them. So I just think they've had a rough year, and we still got to play them again, and there'll probably be a league championship on the line. So I'm not taking them for granted by any means, but I do think historically they're a good program, and but they are one that jumps out at you. I necessarily, if I was in Division I, I wouldn't have to play those guys.
Closing out the top 20 for the guys side, we have Eastlake, Patrick Henry, and defending Division II champions Canyon Crest Academy. So, Coach, what do you say we bounce over to the girls' side? And this one, to me, is very fascinating to watch all season long because Scripps Ranch currently ranked number 1 in the county at 12-2. I know we've jumped over to lax numbers right now for this conversation, but according to Max Preps, they are the number 3 team in the country for girls lacrosse. And that is something that to me is just great to say out of the grow the game hashtag that you've been preaching. That's how you grow it. I would also say, though, that this is something that 3 years ago when Scripps Ranch had Sam Fish as their goalie, as she was considered to be an Under Armour All-American, one of the best goalies, I would have thought that that's sort of the once-in-a-generational talent that you're like, oh, hey, great. They peaked. Well, they don't get a second bite at that apple, and now they are out here absolutely wrecking teams on a daily basis.
Well, and it comes down, we talked about on the boys' side. With the girls, they have a good youth program. They have a group of families committed to the sport and that play in-house and club and are just committed to the game, and they want to play in college, and they're well coached, and that equates to a really good team in girls lacrosse in San Diego. So I think they're the team to beat in the open divisions for sure.
Not necessarily right on their heels, but following them up is La Jolla High School, LCC, and San Marcos. Those are the next 3. And it's interesting that you mentioned strength of schedule playing a bigger role in these rankings and win-loss margin playing a bigger role in these rankings than previously, because La Jolla 10-2, LCC 7-4, San Marcos 9-5. But I know that LCC has played like IMG and some of the really mega teams this season. So it's interesting, 10 wins, 9 wins, but then a 7 kind of sandwiched in there. And then right below them at number 5 is a 6-8 Torrey Pines team. So kind of a different look that it seems to me, and maybe stop me if you think I'm wrong, but on the girls' side, there still is a big jump in terms of these teams are playing up here in who they're scheduling, how they're playing them. And then you get down to 7, 8, 9, where it's back to having teams that are above 500 that maybe you're like, okay, they're still playing a little locally in just the big pond.
Yeah, and I can say I get the opportunity to see La Jolla play and Scripps play earlier in the season, and to me, those are the 2 front runners, regardless of strength of schedule and everything else. And I know both those teams make my daughters really unhappy in the past week. So it was not a happy household. But La Jolla was really good too. And I think they had a 1-goal game with Scripps. But so similar to the boys, I do think there's a couple front runners that like have to get upset to beat. Not to say it can't happen, but then there's a few.
Even I know I'll go out on a limb and I'll say that even La Jolla beating Scripps Ranch would be a major upset.
I agree, but
at a 1-goal game,
but they had a 1-goal game. Yeah,
I will still say that scoring that 1 goal doesn't win it. Scoring that 1 goal ties it.
Yep.
You got to score 2 more in that situation.
No, it's true. It's true. And I think, Scripps runs a...
And yes, I know I just did basic math on here, but it trust me, it sounds good in a little clip.
For the math.
Yeah, it just sounds good
in a lacrosse.
Yeah. One of us has to fake it till they think that we're actually professional broadcasters.
No, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of middle of the pack teams out there that can beat each other at any given time. But yeah, you're right. I think Scripps is
and kind of to my point was those teams are all middle of the pack beating each other already.
Yeah.
That if there was a more well flushed out, deeper situation here, you might not have them all having to play each other in this little elite group of we got to hold on to strength of schedule, and Poway wouldn't have to take 2 losses to Scripps, a loss to La Jolla, and a loss to Coronado just to be like, okay, well, we have enough mathematical strength of schedule points.
Correct.
Instead, on the guys' side, I feel like we were still talking in the 10 to 13 to 15 range about that's a tough team to play. That's a team worth playing.
It's true. I'd say there's definitely a bigger drop off. And again, it goes to your grow the game aspect to it. There are less youth girls programs, and I think it's up and coming more now, but there's just less of it. And that's the boys had a boom where a bunch of kids went off to play college. So there's youth.
Legitimate freaking superstars leaving San Diego. And yes, I mean, full disclosure, both of his kids play at Maryland, which if when you moved out here to the West Coast, I think that you probably would have been shocked to know that one school could potentially send 2 players to Maryland in a 3 or 4 year span. It's just not a San Diego thing.
It was happening. It was happening, but I do think that the amount of kids that go and impact those programs hasn't happened as much as we're seeing now from kids. A bunch of kids in the West are out there.
Nate McPeak, get off the bench, man.
Out at Syracuse. Yep. So so that it's been fun to watch a bunch of these guys contributing. Including my sons as well.
You can be a little bit of a humble brag when there's a national champion in the family. Back to the girls' side, Poway, like I mentioned, they're also in that mix. They're at 6th right now, 5-7 for them. Coronado, though, that's where we jump back to the above 500 teams at 8-4. They're in 7th. Cathedral Catholic, back to the under 500 teams at 8th seed. Canyon Crest at the 9 seed. Back to the above 500 teams. Yeah. So it's a weird, wonky year almost where you look at some of this and you're like, to a casual fan, you're like, what am I missing? And it is that, like you're saying, it's not quite the boom yet on the girls' side. It's a little uneven. It's hard to figure out.
What I see with a lot of these games is every team has, it's like you were saying earlier, every team has a couple really good players. And a lot of times it comes down to how good of a night those players have, how well good of a night the goalie has, and how well the other team coaches against those strengths and weaknesses. And that's like when I watch it, that's what I see. And and everyone handles it differently. But I do think that, and for the most part, besides a couple teams in any given night, like these teams can beat each other if they have a good night or a bad night, or the other team has a bad night. So I do think it's sort of wide open after those first couple.
And then so we get into 10 with Del Norte, and then at 11 and 12 to me is the really interesting case study that's been going on for almost 2 years now. 11 is Granite Hills. Last year, they go undefeated 22-0 through the regular season. They get worked over in the first round of the playoffs by Canyon Crest. This year, they are 13-1 right now, and their only loss was by 19 to Scripps Ranch. So a 13-1 team that is 11th in San Diego is 19 goals worse than that first place team. And that just shows you that, wow, they're good in their subcategory of it, but there is a huge gap to go between the gameplay at 11th and the gameplay at first, which would probably trickle down to at least like 3rd or 4th. So it's really interesting. And then right behind them is Patrick Henry at 12th. They're 12-2, and that's another situation where they get blown out by Scripps. They lose real bad to La Jolla, but then they turn around and they are beating everybody. So they're kind of to me, they're the La Jolla, they're the Saints, they're that of the guys' side on the girls' side, where watch those 2 schools as the barometer for when they finally win a D1 playoff game. then you know the game is really truly starting to break out, and we're into that next win. But until you that, a lot of 10, 15, 20 win seasons that ultimately you kind of go, well, why?
Yeah.
Well, what's the point?
And I compare that to Grossmont on the boys side,
Okay.
and I think I did last year, and I think it's exciting to see Grossmont now with some youth players developing into the system on the boys side. So Granite Hills has kind of been that team over the past couple of years, to your point. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there is a big difference between the top couple and the 10th.
Yeah.
And so, absolutely, and you've seen it.
Yes, that's where you just got to keep watching. Just to round it out before we get out of here, on the girls' side, Bishops 13, Westview 14, defending Division II champions, Our Lady of Peace at 15, University City at 16, Carlsbad 17, Mission Hills 18, La Jolla Country Day 19, and the San Diego Academy Mustangs at 20. Again, you can go to laxnumbers.com for all these rankings. We'll have those up there. Coach, any parting notes that you want to send out to everybody? Any commentary on all this to kind of wrap it up?
No, I just think that it's going to be fun to see how the playoffs shake out and how teams finish up with some of these end of the season league matchups that we all have to face. And those are always different than the early season matchups and fun. So I think it'll be a good run.
It'll be a great run. We will have it all featured here, and we will be here, I promise. I know we've had some consistency issues on this. A, you'll figure out what that all is in the next couple of weeks on social media, but B, we will be here every single week to close out this season. A lot of fun. Like you said, you might even be playing a one-win Bishops team for a league title. Like, there's so much drama on the line here, and we'll have it all for you at SD Prep Insider. Thank you very much, sports fans.